What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have a collection update for you. Can't believe I've done 40 of these so far. It's pretty crazy, just the amount of stuff I've gone through here. But I don't plan on quitting anytime soon, just because I love collecting and I love doing this. So let's get right into it. So starting off with something not very metal and you will know us by the Trail of Dead with their new album X, The Godless Void and Other Stories, or 10, The Godless Void and Other Stories, because I believe this is their 10th album. This is just a really interesting, like, avant-garde, alternative, occasionally heavy band. I've always been fascinated with this band's writing. They love to incorporate lots of different instrumentation, lots of different styles. They've been doing this since, I want to say, the early 2000s, maybe even the late 90s. I have a lot of their albums, and they're always an interesting listen. Again, definitely not metal, but if you're looking for something quasi-heavy at times, but just interesting songwriting, really good. The vocals are kind of so-so on this, but I really love the music on here. It's a really interesting listen. Definitely check it out. Cruel Fate, a Quarternary of Decrepit Nightmares. This came out on PRC Music, I believe, either late last year or early this year. It doesn't say if it's 2020 on here. This is just really interesting, like, sludgy death metal. Really solid stuff. Definitely some Death Doom influence in here. And a little bit of, like, kind of harsher melodic death. Like, some of this really reminds me of Paths of Possession, which was a cool Corpse Grinder project from a while ago that he only did 2 albums with. It's very groove-oriented, just very thick and sludgy, and a really solid release. It takes a while for it to get going, at least in that first track, but once it does get going, it's pretty solid stuff. Definitely check it out. Alright, we got a pair here from Fleshgod Apocalypse. We have Mafia, and we have Oracles. Now, Mafia is just a quick 5-song EP. Really solid stuff. Like, this is honestly some of the stuff I prefer from Fleshgod Apocalypse. This is before the symphonic elements really took over, which I like what they do now, but I like just straight up fast, raw death metal, and this is definitely more in the vein of, like, Hour of Penance and Hideous Divinity and stuff like that. There are some symphonic elements, but they're dialed down a bit, and there's a pretty interesting cover of Blinded by Fear by At the Gates on here. I don't necessarily like the fact that they tried to kind of use blast beats throughout it, but I did like when they broke it up a bit. It's a pretty solid cover. But yeah, solid EP, lots of cool jams. Full length is absolutely banging as well. Again, this is before all the symphonic elements really took hold in this band, so if that kind of detracted you from listening to them, definitely check out this stuff, because it's definitely just more straightforward, technical, brutal death metal. The drumming on both of these albums is just insane. This guy is marvelous. I think it's really interesting that both these albums, the title track on it, are like a little symphonic interlude. I think the end of this one is actually like a little piano sonnet, which is really interesting. But yeah, definitely check it out. These came out on Willow Tip before they got signed to Century Media or Nuclear Blast, one of the two. Either way, definitely check them out. This is really solid death metal. Funeral Winds, Sinister Creed. This is the most recent offering from Funeral Winds. This came out in 2018 on Avant-Garde Music, and it's just very raw black metal. It's not particularly flashy. Actually, it's kind of punky and thrashy in spots, but not particularly interesting, unfortunately. Nothing really stands out. It feels a lot like just Marduk worship. The production really kind of hampers this too. It's really rough sounding, especially the drums. The drums sound, I don't know, just poorly mixed. And the songs tend to meander around a bit. But I mean, there's still some decent tracks in here I'd still recommend checking out. I recommend checking out any of these albums I bring up. But yeah, this one really didn't grab me very much. But still, check it out. You might dig it. Rotting Christ, Passage to Arcturo. This is their first EP, officially released in 1991. This is reissued on Peaceville, I believe, last year or this year. Doesn't really say on here, but I believe it was probably last year, since it takes a little while for Peaceville to get here. Either way, really solid, interesting beginning for this band. They were more of a straight-up death metal band, very thrashy, almost kind of like death worship in spots. You don't hear any of these symphonic elements or a tremendous amount of the black metal influence you hear in their more recent stuff. But interesting beginning for these guys, for sure. Definitely check it out. It's an interesting listen, especially if you've never actually heard where this band began. Good stuff. Solstice to Dust. Now, this is an awesome death thrash band from Miami, Florida. This is where Rob Barrett from Cannibal Corpse got to start before joining Cannibal Corpse. Actually, in between this band and Cannibal Corpse, he joined Malevolent Creation. This came out in 2009 on CXD Media, and apparently it's kind of hard to find. Luckily, I found this in the used bin over one of my local record stores, and solid stuff. It's still pretty much just straight up death thrash. I don't necessarily like the vocals. They kind of stay in this higher, almost scream. They really don't get down and growl very much, which I don't know, I kind of just prefer that in death metal. But the music is pretty solid on this. It's just fast-paced. Like, if you're a big fan of Malevolent Creation, it's very, very similar to that. Even if you're not a fan of Malevolent Creation, definitely check it out. It's really good stuff. It's high-paced. And yeah, we love that in death metal. Check it out. Wolvencrown of Bark and Ash. This is a black metal band from the UK. They're on Avant-Garde Music, and this is really interesting melodic black metal. It's very similar to Abigail Williams, actually. Definitely very atmospheric, too. There's lots of layering to their sound, which definitely reminds me of bands like Enslaved. The vocals are pretty interesting on this. The growls, or screams, rather, they almost sound like Thomas Lindbergh from At the Gates. Now, the clean vocals on here are just kind of okay. They're pretty serviceable, but sometimes the harmonies in here don't really work out very well. And the production here is pretty good too. Sometimes it feels a little hampered by it, but what I really liked, surprisingly, were the keys. I think the keys are actually well done on here and really help build a lot of atmosphere. And I'm generally kind of picky about keyboards. Either way, definitely check it out. Some pretty solid stuff. Alright, we got a pair from Drawn and Quartered here. We have Feeding Hell's Furnace and The One Who Lurks. This pretty much rounds out CD full lengths from Drawn and Quartered for me, and I had to get these because I heard they were amazing. They were just hard to find. Had to order these from Discogs, and they're both killer. I like the production better on One Who Lurks. I actually think it's just heavier and murkier, but some of the songs on Feeding Hell's Furnace actually have more hooks to it. A World in Ashes is definitely one of my favorites on here, but this has killer songs across the board. I think it gets a little muddy towards the end and kind of loses me, but they really dial up that death metal / death doom sound, like very, very similar to like Incantation and Immolation. I absolutely love both of these CDs though, and I'm glad to round out my collection of Drawn and Quartered full lengths now. Killer stuff. If you've never jammed Drawn and Quartered, definitely do it. They're an incredible band and ungodly heavy. Check them out. Amulet, The Inevitable War. This is a really kick-ass trad metal / heavy metal band from the UK. What I really like about them is they're very thrashy and very upbeat. The production on here is fantastic, and the vocals are very close to like Bruce Dickinson and Rob Halford. They're very powerful. They're very out front. There's a really good storytelling aspect to their lyrics too, which I really like. I love the production on this too. And they use keyboards very well in here. They're kind of similar to how the synths were introduced on Somewhere in Time by Iron Maiden. And I really just dug the shit out of this. This is one I missed from last year. It came out on Dissonant Productions. If you're looking for a kick-ass heavy metal, like classic heavy metal, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Angel Witch kind of thing, definitely check this out. And honestly, it registers one of my main complaints about classic heavy metal, where it's not very heavy. This is actually pretty heavy. It has a killer guitar tone on it. Really dug this. Strongly recommend it. It's good stuff. Asphyx, Crush the Cenotaph. We're actually listening to Asphyx right now because I figured it was fitting. This is a reissue from last year on Vic Records of this 1991 EP, and it's absolutely killer. I technically already had this because my reissue of The Rack actually had all this stuff on it, but I kind of wanted a solo copy of it, modestly priced, so figured why not. It's a killer EP. If you've never jammed Asphyx, well, you're listening to them right now, so yeah, they're amazing. One of my personal favorite death metal bands. They're absolutely killer. Definitely check this out. Check out any Asphyx release. Like 90% of them are really good. Check it out. Dust, The Fall of All Things. This is a German sludge metal / doom metal band, and I believe this is self-released. There is no record label mentioned on here at all, so I would assume this is self-released. Pretty interesting stuff. I like the production overall. It's very heavy, very dense sounding, as sludge metal should sound. I'd say some of the songs are a little dull, and they don't really go anywhere, which is, kind of a burden, especially when you're writing longer songs, which these songs are definitely longer. I think a couple of them are cracking the 10-minute mark. But there are some songs here that are absolutely incredible and just mind-numbingly heavy. I believe these guys have more albums. I definitely want to check them out, but this isn't a bad start. I'll definitely go back and listen to this a little bit more, but Pretty solid stuff from the start. Just, minor complaints with just getting a little dull in there. Still, definitely check it out. It's good stuff. Convent. Puritan Masochism. This is a all-female death doom band from Denmark. I thought about actually doing a full-on review for this one, but there were some other releases we wanted to tackle, and it kind of just got pushed by the wayside. This is a pretty interesting release. Mainly, I think the only thing that's really death doom about this are the vocals. The front woman has a massive roar, and occasionally a good scream. It's mostly kept in her lower growl, but musically, like when you listen to the riffs, it really screams more doom metal. Like, it doesn't get very death doomy in terms of the music, but really solid songwriting in here. Very atmospheric in spots. Not a lot of lead work, but there's some clever melodies thrown in there. Pretty decent release. I'm definitely curious to hear more from this band. This came out on Napalm Records, and about the only thing I can really knock it on is maybe kind of a lack of variety in the songs, but overall, it's a pretty good sound, and they do pretty well within it. Solid debut from this band. I definitely recommend checking it out, especially if you just love doom metal. It's good stuff. Odious Mortem, Synesthesia. This is a new tech death band on Willowtip Records, and as soon as I started jamming it, the first thing I thought of was Neuraxis. This band sounds very similar to Neuraxis. If you guys haven't heard Neuraxis before, it was a really solid Canadian tech death band. Awesome running, tons of kick-ass lead work. This is very similar, except I don't think this is produced particularly well. It just sounds mixed kind of poorly. Like, things are separated oddly. I think the drums sound a little too loud, especially the cymbals. And the vocals kind of have a flat performance on here. But musically, there's a lot of cool stuff on here. If you love tech death, and honestly a little bit of suffocation worship on here, because they do just get down and fucking dirty with some breakdowns, this is a pretty decent release. I can't remember if this is their first full-length album. I'll have to go back and check, but I'd be interested in listening to more from this band. It's pretty solid. Either way, definitely check it out. Orchid, Sign of the Witch. This is an EP I was missing from 2015, and I found it and picked it up. This is a little bit different than some of their other stuff. This actually kind of has a little bit more of an upbeat feel. It's kind of like, Led Zeppelin-ish, less Black Sabbath. Really just solid songwriting, great hooks. I think the vocals are actually a little bit different. There's some more lower register stuff. But overall, I was kind of surprised just because these guys are really good at that classic doom metal sound, or almost proto-doom like Witchfinder General. This feels just a little bit different. Only 4 tracks in this, but all 4 of them are absolutely killer. Definitely check this one out, and particularly if you love like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, because it's very close. Check it out. It's good stuff. T.O.M.B, Thin the Veil. This is their debut full-length, I believe, on Dark Essence Records, and this is a very different listen. This is a combination of black metal, noise, and even some industrial stuff in here, and sometimes it blends really well, sometimes it doesn't. It feels like different producers took on different songs. Some songs are just super noisy, some songs are more favoring black metal. Some of these songs even kind of sound like a blackened version of Today Is the Day. Lots of squealing noise and dissonance. And if you're into that sort of thing, it's pretty cool. But this, I kind of fell in and out of it when I was listening to it. It didn't really hold my interest, but there are moments in here that are really cool. And this is definitely an interesting approach to black metal in general. It just has a very unique sound. Definitely check it out. It's at least an interesting listen. I may not have got into it, but you might. And finally, we have Voltor, Entangled in the Webs of Fear. I liked the last Voltor album I had in the collection update so much, I went out and found their debut on Severed Records, and it is just as killer, if not better, than the one I picked up. This is just a solid old-school death metal band from Greece. This one I like the production a little bit more. There's less reverb on everything, but there's still just enough there to make it sound more full. The outright heft of these songs is just immense. Killer songwriting, lots of good hooks in here, lots of good squealing leads in here. You kind of have like levels of like Cannibal Corpse brutality with a bit like Obituary's groove in here. Killer album, I absolutely love this one. If you're looking for some kick-ass old school death metal but from a new band, definitely check this band out. Absolutely awesome. Alright, well that knocks out another one of these. I'm glad to have done 40 of these and glad you guys are still watching. Super thankful for all that. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do shit like this all the time. Catch you guys later.